Today, we're jumping right into one of the absolute wildest underdog stories in human history. Just imagine, for a second, a king sitting thousands of miles away, across an ocean, dictating your taxes and completely ignoring your voice. Now imagine standing up to him, especially when his military is the undisputed, hands-down strongest on the planet. I mean, it sounds like a total suicide mission, right? But it's exactly how the United States was born.
So, how exactly did 13 disjointed colonies, mostly just farmers and merchants, mind you, pull off the actual impossible against the deeply entrenched British Empire? And how does a chaotic rebellion somehow forge a lasting republic? Well, let's track the twists, the incredible luck, and the brilliant strategy that turned a crazy dream of freedom into reality. Okay, let's dive right into this. Part 1. Sparks of Rebellion and the Debt that Ignited a Revolution.
You see, to really understand this rebellion, you've got to look at Britain's massive financial crisis. Following the French and Indian War in 1763, Britain was basically drowning in war debt. And their big solution? Make the prosperous American colonies foot the bill. They started squeezing the colonists with these rapid-fire taxes. You had the Sugar Act in 1764. A year later, the Stamp Act, taxing everyday paper goods. Then the Tea Act of 1773. It was just this relentless, constant campaign to extract wealth.
But here's the thing. For the colonists, the core issue wasn't just the cash. It was the principle. They had absolutely zero elected representatives in the British Parliament, not one. So to them, having this ocean-away government demanding their money was a massive violation of their rights. No taxation without representation quickly became this furious rallying cry. It sparked huge boycotts and gave rise to groups like the Sons of Liberty.
Which brings us to part 2, the point of no return, from protest to open rebellion.
Because, eventually you can only squeeze a population so hard before ideological arguments turn bloody. In 1770, that rising tension exploded in the streets with the tragic Boston Massacre. And the backlash, it only grew from there. Just think about the sheer audacity of what came next. 342. That's exactly how many chests of tea American patriots, disguised as Native Americans, dumped right into the harbor during the 1773 Boston Tea Party. We're talking staggering destruction of property here. King George III retaliated hard with the crushing Intolerable Acts, literally closing Boston Harbor. But instead of breaking their spirit, it actually united the colonies even further.
The actual breaking point finally hit on April 19, 1775. British troops marched out to Lexington and Concord to seize colonial weapons. They met the colonial militiamen. A tense standoff ensued, and then a single, mysterious gunshot rang out. To this day, nobody knows who actually fired it, but that shot, heard around the world, instantly morphed rising tensions into a full-blown, terrifying war.
Moving on to Part 3, Declaring True Independence. A new nation takes shape.
Now, what's really interesting about this is just how terrifying the odds actually were. When you look at what Commander George Washington inherited to fight this war, it's bleak. On one side, you have the Continental Army. They were poorly trained, starving, and highly prone to desertion. I mean, many of these guys didn't even have shoes. And on the other side, the British military. Elite, incredibly well-funded, and the undisputed strongest force on Earth. The power disparity was almost laughable.
But despite those impossible odds, the colonists took the ultimate leap. On July 4, 1776, they formally adopted the Declaration of Independence. It boldly proclaimed that all men are created equal with unalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. With that one single document, America was no longer just fighting over taxes. They were fighting for their very right to exist. All right, Part 4. Surviving the Darkest Days, the Abyss, and the Turn. Because declaring independence is one thing, but actually securing it, that's another story entirely.
The grim reality is that by late 1776, this whole revolution was teetering on total collapse after some brutal losses in New York. Facing the absolute end, Washington made this brilliant, all-is-lost gamble. On Christmas night, right in the middle of a blinding snowstorm, he led his ragged army across the icy Delaware River. They surprised the Hessian forces at Trenton for a miraculous victory that, against all odds, completely revived American morale.
So, the crucial point is what happened the very next year. In 1777, at Saratoga, New York,
American forces actually forced an entire British army to surrender. And why does this matter so much? Because Saratoga proved to the rest of the world that America could actually win this thing. It convinced France to formally ally with the US, pouring essential money, expert soldiers, and a fleet of ships into the fight. But before all that French help could truly turn the tide, Washington's men had to survive the horrific winter of 1777 at Valley Forge. We're talking freezing temperatures, profound hunger, and rampant disease that took thousands of lives. Yet, under the rigorous, demanding drilling of Prussian officer Baron von Steuben, the survivors simply didn't break. They entered Valley Forge as a desperate, ragtag militia, and they emerged as a highly disciplined, hardened fighting force.
Which brings us to Part 5, Victory and Global Impact, the world turned upside down.
Let's move to and see how this builds, because by 1781, the whole war had shifted south. British General Cornwallis dug in at Yorktown, Virginia, and Washington, he saw his window. The strategy here is an absolute masterclass. Step 1, Washington and his French allies secretly march south by land. Step 2, the French Navy arrives perfectly on time to block any British escape by sea. Step 3, caught right in the middle of this brilliant pincer maneuver, the Allied forces unleash a relentless bombardment on the trapped British troops. The pressure was just insurmountable. On October 19, 1781, General Cornwallis surrendered. Just think about the massive scale of this. Over 7,000 elite British troops laying down their arms. Legend actually has it that a British band played "The World Turned Upside Down" during the surrender, which honestly was incredibly fitting. This staggering event effectively won the war for the Americans. After that, negotiations moved to Paris, and in 1783, the British Empire formally recognized the United States. But America didn't just win its freedom, it secured an incredible expanse of new territory stretching all the way to the Mississippi River. 13 rebellious colonies were now officially one recognized nation. And this brilliantly illustrates how this story goes so far beyond just North America. The global ripple effects were absolutely massive. They established the first modern democratic republic based on Enlightenment ideals, proving that ordinary people really could topple an empire and govern themselves. This underdog victory directly inspired the French Revolution and sparked similar independence movements all across Latin America.
It leaves us with a genuinely fascinating what-if. How completely different would the modern world look today if the American experiment had failed right there on the icy banks of the Delaware River? This was an immensely fragile legacy that hung by a thread time and time again. A revolution born from a fight over taxes that ultimately gave rise to a republic built on liberty. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you next time.